Well, hello friends. I am so excited for today's video topic. We are going to be chatting all about being a digital nomad, even in these crazy times, how to move abroad long-term if you're interested in that, diversifying your assets, and who better to chat about that than Andrew Henderson from the awesome YouTube channel, Nomad Capitalist. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on today.
All right, I've been looking forward to this. Thank you.
It's actually funny how I came across your channel. I think it was last year sometime when I basically sold everything I had, decided to do this long term, and everybody was like, you have to check out Nomad Capitalist channel. He has so much good info. So that's actually how I found your channel. So before we get into the current state of affairs, Andrew, could you give a little bit of a background about yourself, when you decided to leave the States and kind of your reasons for that?
Well, there are a lot of reasons. I've been running this Nomad Capitalist blog and then podcast and then business for about a decade now. I have been studying the idea of diversifying internationally, living internationally for about 15 years and doing it for somewhere in between. And, growing up, I got what I think maybe a lot of nomads will appreciate this, what I call a permission slip. And I think this was very helpful in my decision from my father, who said, listen, you don't have to stick around here. You can go where you're treated best. And it was very interesting, the things that he talked about 25 years ago. I was 11, 12, 13 years old, about how the United States and how much of the Western world would change to really be against people who think differently. Against people who want to create businesses and want to be successful. That wasn't the reason that I left. That was a part of it. But initially, it was just an idea of, maybe this isn't the right place for me. I think it's fascinating. There's almost 8 billion people in the world. The idea that we're all born in exactly the right place.
Yes.
And for me, social level, as a very, very young entrepreneur, I started a business first in the broadcasting industry. I did a couple different things starting at 19 and kind of by early 20s had it going and figured out. I realized that when you go to other countries, every country has something to offer. There are things the United States is best at, not just prisoner population and obesity, but there are a few things they're pretty good at. A lot of other countries are good at things too. And I noticed that the social connections were better. I noticed that interest rates were better. I noticed that, returns on investment, if you bought property, were better. I noticed that, certain markets seem more secure. Certain places seem like easier to start a business or better opportunities. And so I just eventually said, I'm leaving the US. That's about a decade ago as well. And I started documenting it. And, here I am. I haven't looked back since.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think you're very right in saying that every place has something that they're really great in and some where they lack. So it's about finding that combination that really works for you. You don't have to just choose one place exclusively and the things that you hate about it, you just have to deal with. So
right.
Great points made. So obviously things have really changed in this past year with the current state of affairs. Do you think that really has made a very, what's the word I'm looking for, serious, I guess, effect on people's freedoms and just how simple it's going to be to not only travel for tourism, but also travel on a longer term basis, like a digital nomad visa or getting permanent residency? How do you think those things are going to be affected?
Well, you've seen a great proliferation of digital nomad visas. Now, what I tell people is make sure you understand the tax consequences of that. If you're an American, as you know, you leave the United States, you're taxed no matter where you live. There are exemptions and exclusions and credits and things you can do. You can make a lot of money and not pay a lot of tax as a U.S. citizen, but you do need to be aware of how the systems match up. If you're not an American, then you want to make sure in your home country, where are you going to be paying tax, what that is. But there's been a lot more digital nomad visas. I think that, what I've seen is it kind of proves the thesis we've been talking about for a while. Number one, you want to have redundancies. Number two, you want to have something more formal. Having residences and citizenships has helped me in this last year and a half to travel around. I just got news this morning. I actually ironically got a new citizenship. It's a place where I like to spend time. And, I think that's better to say, hey, I'm a citizen. I can always come here. I'm at the whims of being a tourist. It was pretty easy to go there as a tourist, but who knows what can happen in the future. So, I think that Latin America and Eastern Europe are probably places that I'd be looking at, not only that have been more open, but where you can go and say, hey, listen, I've got $30,000 in the bank, give me a residence permit. And now you're a status above. And that's going to help you in a number of ways.
So you mentioned Latin America and Eastern Europe as being very welcoming to tourism and foreigners getting like permanent residency or a second passport even. Which country specifically would you recommend people consider?
Well, as to the passport, I mean, if you're looking for a passport quickly, it's going to cost you something. You're going to need to do something exceptional. You're going to need to make a donation. You're going to need to buy real estate. So let's just take a look at the point of living in Eastern Europe or living in Latin America. We have a number of people who are certainly concerned about what's happening with the vaccine. And so for those folks, they're looking at Nicaragua. If it's Caribbean citizenship, it's maybe Grenada is a bit more flexible, where at least you have, the right to choose. I will say for those folks, certainly the standard of, hey, we're going all out with new regulations is different in a Australia than it is in a Colombia in terms of what that actually looks like, or in terms of a Turkey or an Albania, right? I mean, some people say things and some people actually do them. I would say let's just take that off the table for a moment. Mexico, if you have some money or you can prove some income, that'll work. Now, the challenge for some people, for a lot of these programs is you generally want to go back to the country where you're an official resident or where you're a citizen of to use the embassy, right? So if you're a Canadian, they might say, hey, go back to Canada, unless you can prove you actually live wherever you're applying. You can't do it in Mexico generally. So Mexico is a good one. And I think it's obviously a great place. It's been wide open. You get so many places to go. Nicaragua has been popular. Obviously, it's been a place with issues for some time, but plenty of people live there and they're fine. Costa Rica has been a bit more difficult, but again, another place, if you can show you have money, they'll let you in. That's most of Latin America, quite frankly. If you have income, Latin America is the continent, or the Central and South America, the continents of income. Asia is much more wealth focused. And so Asia is also much less open right now. Albania is one that I think I've been looking at as a hidden gem for some time.
Absolutely.
If you're an American, you can pretty much get a 5-year residence permit without really needing to do much else. Otherwise, you are going to need to live there. Dirt cheap. You can buy a house for next to nothing on the beach.
Yeah, no, really great options. And I think just in general, people need to kind of open up their worldview of which countries could actually be a really good option for them. So those are some awesome ones to consider.
I think that is the great point of this last year and a half is people are realizing they have to shift. What I've been saying for a long time, and what I think people are starting to realize now, when they first start looking at, hey, I want to get out of here. Hey, I want to get a plan B. The first thought for some people is there's nowhere to go because I'm from the US, Canada's a problem, Australia's a problem, all these, no. You got to change the playing field of places that you're looking at, right? And I think I have a guy from the Cayman Islands. The guy lives in a multi-million-dollar mansion. And he's saying, listen, I don't like what they're doing here. That's his prerogative. And he's saying, I'm moving to Nicaragua. This guy could live anywhere in the world, but for what he's looking for, and obviously people have different goals. There's finances, there's freedom, there's lifestyle. But for him, it's freedom. He doesn't like what's going on with the pandemic. And he's saying, I'm going to Nicaragua. Now, this guy never would have thought about going to Nicaragua just a couple of years ago. But, there are countries that are opening up. And I think that, yes, if you want to travel, this is a great opening up of places that you probably wouldn't have thought of before.
For people who are maybe not looking outside of this box just yet, speaking of people who are Americans, Canadians, Australians, who have a really strong passport, to people who already have that, what would you say are the benefits of getting a second passport that maybe, the average person doesn't consider?
Number one, when you look at the height of the pandemic, the US passport in terms of its travel freedom was on par literally with Rwanda. I think that I've been telling people, in Australia and Germany and all over the world who have these great passports, you want to diversify. Now, a few people like Germany maybe have some restrictions on that, but for everybody else, number one, if you're an American, you never know when they're going to tighten the noose on these taxes. And I have a lot of people who are investing in things like crypto or have growing businesses, and they realize if they ever do the ultimate cutting of the cord with the United States, they probably want to do so earlier than later if they value their finances. And so having that second passport allows them to do that. For everyone else, you see fringe politicians, and that's always how it starts in countries like Canada and Australia, talking about, why should you as a Canadian be able to go and live somewhere else and not pay us? They've totally turned the model of tax collection in terms of it's to support the roads and the schools and the bridges that you use. Now, just the fact that you were born on Canadian soil and therefore a Canadian citizen, there are politicians who want to tax you. Germany, I have people saying the same. The Netherlands, I have people saying the same. I'm all for living somewhere and paying taxes. And I'm looking at some moves right now that would raise my tax bill because I pay very little. I'm happy to pay something, but I'm not happy to pay, if I'm in your case, if I'm Canadian, for living in Colombia or living in the Caribbean and paying Canada. And I think you're going to see out of the desperation that has been inspired by this pandemic, the rich, they targeted the rich. They wanted to target Apple and they ended up targeting you and they me. And so if you think that they're not going to define rich in a very convenient way for them, it's not just going to be Elon Musk. I think people should be prepared.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely a different time. And there's nothing worse than deciding you're now in a desperate situation, you have to do something, then taking your time, finding out what the best options are and making a move before things get really bad. Obviously, things you could say have already gotten really bad to a certain extent, but
that's the other thing, Alina. I mean, it's like, people say, oh, only when it gets bad enough. What do they got to do? They got to like drown you in chloroform? Like what's going to happen? I mean, for 20 years, it's been consistently getting worse. But if you don't start now, you're going to be paying $100,000 when you're trying to do it in 6 months.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Not only do you want to do things ahead of time, but you also want to diversify your assets because who really knows, what's going to happen with each specific country. You don't really want to put all your eggs in one basket, and having these options is obviously one way you can kind of guard yourself from that. Last question, because obviously this is a topic that is much more in depth, that you really need to, either research yourself or have somebody like your own business that helps 7 and 8 figure entrepreneurs really build a plan for themselves. But for people who are, kind of at the precipice of considering this, what are some things that you would recommend they kind of try and set up, like safety nets, whether it's getting a certain kind of job that helps them live, abroad, work remotely, health insurance, because obviously that's a subject that a lot of people kind of have questions about. What kind of things would you recommend to somebody who's just thinking of taking that first step?
I think it depends on your risk factors. Listen, we have a lot of people in Eastern Europe, Latin America, who are on our team. And you know what? I wouldn't be nearly as concerned as I were them because their governments aren't spending all their time. They have other problems than to think of new ways to screw over their citizens. And by the way, people in those places have pushed me. No, we don't want to be remote. But if you want to be remote, obviously, figure out how to have a job to do that or have a freelance or do whatever that you can do. My idea is if you're just trying to get started, dip your toe in. Even if you're in crypto, by the way, get a bank account somewhere. Go to Armenia, go to Ecuador. There's a lot of places, but they constantly change. But those are just 2 examples. Georgia, I suppose, a little bit more difficult now. Get a bank account, put $1,000 in there, and then just watch it. Maybe you go to Canada and you take out $100. You're like, oh, it works. Mm-hmm. I think those baby steps of getting comfortable, right? I mean, one of my first properties that I bought overseas was like $22,000. It was just like an experiment almost. Now, I mean, I buy stuff for much, much more than that. And I have people that I trust that I've met over the years. I just say, oh yeah, show me the Zoom video. Okay, all right, let's just do it. Because I've taken the steps. I think that you want to get comfortable having some money somewhere else. If you have precious metals, put it overseas, Singapore. If you have if you have money, if you have a bank account, get a bank account somewhere else. Obviously, you may have to report these bank accounts based on where you're living, if you're a US citizen, for example. So make sure you get that done properly. But get a residence permit. And if all it is Mexico or something, and listen, hey, I make $3,000 a month or whatever, 22 and change. Hey, here I am. Help me get it. Go through the bureaucracy, deal with it, and understand that different countries work differently. Obviously, again, what I'm helping people do, we'll give people Mexican residence. We'll also help them get, citizenships that are expensive. When you have a pretty big business, this stuff can take some time. I'm working on a 6-month personal tax project. It's costing me over $50,000. If you're at the big business level or whatever medium business level, then be prepared for that. But I think to be prepared for that, no matter where you are, start small. Bank accounts, residence. Check your family tree. By the way, do you have a parent, a grandparent, a great grandparent who can entitle you to citizenship? Right? Is somebody Italian? Do that. So I would look at all the things that don't cost that much. Obviously, from my perspective, if I can save you $1 million in tax, spending $200,000 to do that in the first year is a good deal. But if that's not your situation, then I would say accumulate lots of little things and just get comfortable.
Totally. No, that's exactly it. And that's with travel in general, right? It's like sometimes people just throw themselves into the deep end. They're way over their head with, knowing what's a scam, what's not, what's a good decision for them and what isn't. So kind of just dipping your toes, like you said, of getting the bank account, looking into permanent residency, seeing if they already have, a second passport that maybe they're entitled to through their relatives. These are all steps that everybody can take that are relatively inexpensive and just get you accustomed to what would it be like to not be tied to one country.
I will say I've really encountered very, very few scams. I do think a lot of these turnkey real estate deals, including some here in Colombia, are run by people that I don't really put a lot of confidence in. I think that you have to go into it with the mindset of life is going to be different. And that's the goal. If you want things in your life to change, you've got to change the things in your life, whatever it is, freedom, finances, or lifestyle, or all of the above.
Absolutely. Well, whenever we change our external circumstances, we also have to change on an internal level as well. So it's definitely a dual process, you could say.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for coming on today. It was a pleasure to chat with you. And of course, I will be linking Andrew's channel, Nomad Capitalist, in the description, as well as their Instagram. And if you are a 7 and 8 figure entrepreneur who is looking for a customized plan, Andrew and his team also do that. So look for that in the description. And as always, I hope you guys are having a fantastic day. Let me know your thoughts in the comments and keep being your own kind of beautiful. Bye, guys.